So I'm very happy to present here today. I want to talk a little bit about a study in which I examined the effects of mental countermeasures on the CIT. I did this study together with Professor Gershon Ben-Shakhar. I believe he's also here in the audience. So first of all, a little bit about CIT. What is the CIT? Well, the CIT is actually, in long, we call it also the concealed information test. So it's basically a type of polygraph test. However, we're not trying to detect deception. The CIT aims to detect concealed information, just as the name says. So how the test works, it usually uses a very simple multiple choice format. So let's imagine there was a crime, for example, a murder. One of the questions in the CIT can be, what was the murder weapon? Then, following the question, we can show several possible answers. So, for example, a knife, a rope, an ice pick. I don't know how many people have an ice pick at home, but anyway, a gun or a baseball bat. So we have here all kinds of possible murder weapons. And of course, only one of these options is a true murder weapon in the case under investigation. And in the CIT, we also call this the critical item. And all the other items we call control items. Now, what happens in the CIT? Imagine if you are innocent, you didn't kill anyone. So it doesn't matter, you might be nervous, but you will not recognize any of these answers specifically, so you will not have a differential response. However, if you did kill someone, let's say with an ice pick, you might recognize this item, and then you will show a differential response. Now you can look at all kinds of responses. You can look at reaction time, eye movements, some of the later studies, brain responses, and also at autonomic physiological measures. And those are just the measures that I want to talk about today. So for example, skin conductance will go up when you recognize the critical item, but respiration and heart rate actually reduce, they go down. Now, if you killed someone and you are taken to the police station and they tell you, we want you to undertake a CIT. The second, the police start attaching all kinds of electrodes to your body. So you realize that something is being measured. And you might try to distort your physiological responses because you want to pass the test. You want to seem innocent. So you can do something. You can try to beat the test and use countermeasures. Now, these countermeasures may be physical. So an example of a physical countermeasure is to wiggle your toes inside your shoes. But you could, for example, also bite your tongue. And another type of mental countermeasure, is a mental countermeasure. So instead of trying to do something physical, you can simply do something mentally. So for example, you can think of something very arousing, such as a car crash. Or maybe, for example, here in Israel, in some studies, they use the thought of an upcoming rocket alarm. Now, you should do these countermeasures if you want them to work to the control items, of course, in the CIT, to try and raise responses to these items and reduce the difference between critical and control items. Now, there have been already, of course, a few previous studies that examined the effect of countermeasures on the CIT. And those studies actually all found very interesting results. They usually found that these countermeasures, also physical, but mostly the mental ones were examined, affect the skin conductance measure. So really, when you think of something arousing, when seeing a control item, skin conductance goes up and the CIT effect reduces. But they didn't find so much an effect on the respiration and heart rate measures. Now, this raises the question, how can it be? How can it be that the same countermeasure, trying to think of something arousing, for example, only affects skin conductance, but not two other autonomic physiological measures? Now, we thought that this might be because the different physiological measures maybe reflect different underlying cognitive mechanisms. And this is actually something, an idea that we came up with in a series of our previous studies. So we ran a series of studies in which we examined exactly this. whether the different measures reflect single mechanism or multiple mechanisms. So what we did in these studies is that we always compared two conditions. We had a classical conceal condition, because in the CIT, of course, you want to conceal your knowledge, you want to come out as innocent, or you want to reveal your knowledge. So this was the novel condition, the reveal condition. For example, participants had to pick a card, one card out of 6, and after they had to try to conceal or reveal it. Now, in this graph, I added the combined data of 3 of the studies. And you can see here, we have the first measure, SCR, it's the skin conductance. There's no difference between the conceal and the reveal conditions. But with respiration and heart rate, we have this reduction only in the conceal condition. So the whole CIT effect with these measures disappeared when participants tried to reveal. And we therefore concluded that skin conductance, as it raises also when you're motivated to conceal and also when you're motivated to reveal, is tied to orienting. Because the second you see the critical item, it's significant for you, you have an orienting response to the item. However, the respiration and heart rate CIT effects only happen when you're motivated to conceal. And when you're motivated to conceal, you might try to inhibit your responses because you want to come out as innocent. You don't want to respond. And therefore, we said that it's likely that these measures reflect inhibition. Okay, so it all basically comes back to the idea that different physiological measures, their responses in the CIT, may actually reflect different underlying cognitive mechanisms. Now, with this idea, we developed the current study that I would like to talk about for the rest of this talk. And in this study, we wanted to take the classical countermeasure that has been used in previous studies, in which they tell participants to think of something arousing, such as a car crash when they see the control items, to a novel type of countermeasure. Now, why? Because the classical countermeasure, we expected to affect the orienting of attention. The second you see a control item in the CIT, you start thinking of a rocket alarm, you start thinking of a car crash, you make this item significant because of your thoughts, orienting will increase. And in the novel countermeasure group, we wanted to affect the other mechanism, inhibition. And what we told participants, we told them try to reveal, not to conceal your information, as in the previous studies. But there is an important difference, and I'll explain it now more deeply. So how did it exactly go? So first of all participants came to the lab, and we told them to perform a small crime, a mock crime. So we gave them a key, we gave them instructions to find an office of a professor somewhere in the university, open the door with the key, enter into the office, and then find several objects. They all had to find a piece of jewelry. So for example, a diamond ring. It was of course not a real diamond, it doesn't matter, and some money. And so for example, a bill of 200 shekels because the study was performed in Israel. Then participants came with the piece of jewelry and with the money back to the laboratory. And in the laboratory, we gave them further instructions about the CIT test that they had to undergo, and also instructions about the countermeasure instructions. So again, we had two conditions. We had a classical countermeasure and a novel countermeasure. Now, in the classical countermeasure, we told participants that in order to try and beat the CIT, to come out as unknowledgeable, and they should try to increase their responses to 2 of the control items. We also explained them how they could do this, and we told them they should simply think of something arousing. Now, one arousing event was given to them. We told them to think of a painful dental treatment, which was especially not nice for people that don't like dentists. And the second event was personal to participants. So we told them to try and think of an arousing event from the past, write it down into sentences, and think of that when seeing the control items. Now, this countermeasure was expected to affect the orienting factor, as I said before. And as we believe that skin conductance is tied to orientation, we believe that it should have affected skin conductance. Now, in the novel countermeasure condition, we simply told participants, okay, you performed the crime, Now you need to undergo the CIT. Try not to conceal your knowledge. Try to reveal it. Because when you try to conceal and you try to inhibit your responses, you come out as more guilty. So this novel countermeasure condition was expected to affect the inhibition factor and consequently respiration and heart rate measures. So here you can see the results in one graph. On the y-axis, we have the detection score, which is simply the CIT effect. So it reflects the difference between critical and control items. On the bottom, we have the free physiological measures. In pink, we have the classical countermeasure condition. And in yellow, we have the novel countermeasure condition. So first of all, if we look at skin conductance, we can really see a big difference between conditions. We found a significant difference here. And what happened is that the CIT effect with this measure was much, much smaller in the classical countermeasure condition. So this basically repeated previous studies. Respiration and heart rate, however, were not affected. We had very similar CIT effects with these measures in both conditions. I added here also the heart rate graphs. So what do you see here? On the y-axis, the change in heart rate. On the x-axis, you can see time, 15 seconds after item presentation. In purple, you can see the heart rate deceleration to critical items. So you can really see how it goes down. And in orange, you see the heart rate response to control items. So you can basically see here that there was no real difference between conditions. In the novel condition, it might have become a little bit smaller, which we expected, but there was no difference between conditions here. So just to recap, we found no difference with skin conductance between we found a difference with skin conductance between conditions. And skin conductance was affected by the classical countermeasure, and this supports the idea that skin conductance reflects an orientation response. Respiration and heart rate, however, were unaffected by the novel countermeasure, which affected inhibition. So this was maybe a little bit unexpected, but it's important to note that in this specific study, all participants first performed a mock crime. So imagine you perform a mock crime. After you perform a crime, you feel guilty. Your nature, what does it tell you? Try and conceal the knowledge. So if after the experimenter tells you, don't conceal, try to reveal, it might actually be too difficult. So basically our conclusion, as I wrote down here, it might be easy to facilitate an orientation response, but it might be difficult to stop inhibiting your responses when you are guilty. Thank you very, very much. Are there any questions?